finished chapter 2 last week, and we are going to start chapter 3 this week, but we want to do a little bit of homework on chapter 2. So let's pull out our books, chapter 2, 4. Oh, first of all, did any of you see it over the weekend? My head exploded. On Meet the Press, they had a debate, quote unquote, of global climate change with the science guy and some congresswoman from New York. It was so inept, I about wanted to vomit on the table. And the lack of logic in the discussion of global climate change is really shocking. Shocking.
When you said the science guy, are you talking about Bill Nye, or are you just talking about, he's getting a lot of attention, really.
Apparently he had a debate with somebody recently about evolution, and now he's debating this Republican congresswoman about global climate change. And right out of the gate, she hits him with ad hominem. He's not even a climate scientist. He's an actor, she says. What are you? You're a politician. That's below actors. So from the get-go, this woman is just throwing out fallacies, rhetorical devices, the complete absence of an argument. And Republicans will go from saying, oh, there is no global climate change, to, in the same sentence, they'll do this. Oh, yes, there is, but we can do nothing about it. And they'll do that within the span of a second, a sentence. And so the argument shifts, and boy, it'd be hard to really critically analyze a debate about global climate change from a logical perspective, because there is no logic to it. And it's particularly pressing for you guys, because this is your planet that they're messing with. And both Bill Nye and that woman will be dead and gone while you're dealing with the implications of this pathetic excuse for a debate about this issue. But I digress. So we completed the discussion of these 2 chapters. We have a quiz at the end of this week, Wednesday. We have a quiz Wednesday. So we're going to do some homework on chapter 2 today, and we're going to try to cover some of chapter 3. The quiz that we're going to have on Wednesday will cover chapter 1, 2, and the portion of chapter 3 that we cover. Any questions? Bill Nye, the science guy, actually made some sense. And he had this wonderful look on his face the whole time. Do I have to talk to this woman? Is this the one? And it's like, where do I begin? Everything that comes out of her mouth just doesn't make much sense. Very difficult to engage in a discussion there. All right, so 2-4, 1 through 5. Let's take a look at some homework. All right, identify the premises and the conclusions in the following arguments. So what we're trying to do is identify the arguments that are being developed here, and what's the conclusion, and what is the premises. Number 1. Michael, why don't you take a crack at number 1. Why don't you go ahead and read it, and then diagnose the premises and the conclusion.
Yep. The darned engine pings every time we use the regular unleaded gasoline, but it doesn't do it with super. I bet that there's a difference in the octane ratings between the two, in spite of what my mechanic says.
All right. So what would premise, and what would be the conclusion?
The premise would be the darned engine pings every time we use the regular unleaded gasoline.
Correct. What would be the conclusion?
I bet that there is a difference in the octane ratings between the two.
All right, so the Buddha is on the line. I won't give it away as yet. Very good, Michael.
I have a question.
Yes?
Not to go against what you just said, but is the premise the engine pings on regular gas and not on super? Is that part of the premise?
Yes.
It's the entire first sentence.
Yes.
So like and combines two.
I think you don't need an and there. He's referring to that whole sentence as being premise one. So the engine pings every time we use regular unleaded gasoline, but it doesn't do it with super. That would be the premise, the whole thing. Good point, though. That clause is important. If it did it for both regular and super, then the conclusion about the octane ratings would not be as strong. Very good point. Any questions with how we're doing this now? All we're identifying is the conclusion and the premises. By the way, if it's extremely hard to do this, it might suck as an argument. So be keen that it should be clear when you develop an argument what the premises are and the conclusion. Number two, Cody, why don't you take number two?
Chances are I'll be carded at JJ's since Kara, Sherry, and Bobby were all carded there, and they all look as though they're about 30.
All right, so what's the premises?
The premise is chances are I'll be carded at JJ's.
Nope.
No?
Oh,
Okay. Oh, that's the conclusion.
correct.
Because they were all carded and they look about 30.
Right. There's a couple things here. First, they're often trying to trick you, so they're going to put the conclusion first just to see if you're paying attention. Number two, pay attention to the premise indicators. Since, because. What are some other premise indicators? That's a conclusion indicator. But since would clue you in that what follows the sentence is a premise. Very good. All right, don't let them trick you. Leslie, why don't you take number three?
70% of freshmen at state college come from wealthy families. Therefore, probably about the same percentage of all state college students come from wealthy families.
First, what planet is this guy on? Second, premise is?
70% of freshmen at state college come from wealthy families.
Yeah. And after the therefore would be the conclusion. Once again, therefore, that's a conclusion indicator. So it's letting you know what's coming. Now, what 70% of freshmen come from wealthy families? Probably the same percentage in state college. That's not the case at Montgomery College. But at state universities, it probably is, maybe. Probably is. It's getting more difficult to send kids to college. It's definitely. And it's actually impacting our economy. Because if you come out of college with a degree and a student loan the size of a house, that undermines your ability to buy a house or a car or anything else. Conversely, when you compare it with the 1950s, when people came back from World War II, they came back to the GI Bill. They gave you a free education. And then you went out and got a job that could pay, just one job, that could pay for your 2.3 kids, your dog, your wife, your mortgage. And retirement was taken care of. As a result, we had more demand in the economy. We had the longest period of uninterrupted economic growth. One could argue that the fact that you're getting shafted on your education is why our economy is not growing. Why is it this year free for you, Cody? You know, we had high school, all the way to high school in the 50s. Well, what kind of job can you get with a high school degree now?
Probably like just being a waiter at a restaurant.
You want fries with that? So in order for you to do anything, you need to have that BA, you know? Well, the needs in terms of education have gone up, but the state has not gone up in terms of its grades. We had free high school since, forever. When did we pay for high school? Never. Well, we need to boost that up. You need to go up to 13th or 14th grade in order to get the real job now. And instead of giving you that educational opportunity, what we're giving you is a bill for this education. Meanwhile, rich people, they don't have to do that. Anybody know how Mitt Romney paid for his university education?
Okay.
Sold some stock. Sold some stock. Think about that. Some people write in, others have to mortgage their family to do it. Not fair. Not fair. And, you know, forget about fair. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. We don't get the economic growth that we want if we're saddling students with all of this debt. So not only is it in your interest to reduce that debt, but it's in everybody's interest that we do that. Because then you have a greater ability to go out and stimulate economic growth. But once again, I digress. So that was number 3. They're talking about state colleges. My home turf, I can't help but talk about that. Number 4. Why don't you take number 4?
When blue jays are breeding, they become aggressive. Consequently, scrub jays, which are very similar to blue jays, can also be expected to be aggressive when they are breeding.
All right, so what is the premise?
The premise is blue jays are breeding, when blue jays are breeding, they become aggressive.
Very good.
And
After consequently,
yeah, there is
is a conclusion.
yeah.
Consequently is a conclusion indicator. So if you had from your PowerPoint that list of conclusion and premise indicators, I think there is one in every one of these. Let me see. Is there one in the first one? I don't see one there.
There's one first one.
Where? Where's the premise? Or
No, there isn't one.
there isn't one thing.
But the others
Cool.
do have one.
Since in number 2, number 3, therefore, number 4, consequently, number 5, what's that? I don't see one in number 5. How about 6? You see one in number 6? At least, but,
Most likely is
kind of, running up close to one. Very good, Cody. 7, since, but, therefore, and 8.
There's none in 9.
Yeah. So you can find them usually all over the place, and those will tell you right off what's what. What's the premise?
Aren't there 2 premises in number 4?
Number 4.
Yeah, which are very similar to blue jays.
Like what I do is I'll insert a because to see if it works. If it works, then I'll count it as a premise.
Now, that's an interesting question, because since that whole sentence is after the consequently, most would tend to argue that it should be viewed as a conclusion. However, one could say that nested within that conclusion, you have another premise. You could say that the premises, plural, are when blue jays are breeding, they become aggressive. Premise number 2 could be scrub jays are very similar to blue jays. Consequently, scrub jays can also be expected to be aggressive when they're breeding. So you could unpack that conclusion and shove that half into the premise. Absolutely.
Are you expecting us to do that?
No. In this, I would accept that as being part of the conclusion, given that it is in the ordinary language arc. Everything after the consequently has to be considered a conclusion. Good question, Travis. Very good. All right, number 5, the last one. Why don't you check number 5?
I'm sure Marietta comes from a wealthy family. She told me her parents benefited from the cut in the capital gains tax.
Definitely wealthy. All right, so what's the premise and what's the conclusion?
The premise is she told me her parents benefited from the
Very good. Very good. Tried to a switch on you there. Very good. That's the premise, and the conclusion is that you must come from a wealthy family. Absolutely. Anybody who benefits from a cut in capital gains tax is definitely wealthy. And here, once again, logic. Do you know what the capital gains tax is, the percentage? Nobody? All right, so it's like 15%. 15%. Do you know what people who make $50,000 a year, dollars a year pay? Like 25 or 30%. And the reason is that they're earning it through pay. And rich people have found an excuse, and if you earn it through investments, you pay less money. Well, Mitt Romney earns all of his money through investments. So this filthy rich man pays less than half of the percentage on income tax that most of us pay. Yes?
What's considered rich? Like, how much?
What's that?
Like, what's considered rich? Like, over how much? Like,
I don't know. What do you
I mean, there are like some pro athletes who make like more than $5 million a year or something like that. But I'm just trying to see like what's actually considered like rich, like this set amount.
So that issue might be irrelevant to what we're discussing, because
Yeah.
the NFL athletes, they are going to pay 25 to 30% on their pay because they're earning it through work. They're not earning it through an investment somewhere. And so even those pro athletes that make a lot of money, LeBron James is going to pay a higher interest rate than the owner of the team. Yeah, this is disgusting. Even the richest men in the world, like, you know, from Ohio, Omaha, Warren Buffett, he thinks this is disgusting. This is why we have a deficit, is because rich people are hiding their money in foreign accounts, and they're paying 14 and 15% on income that's millions and millions of dollars. So, you know, what's rich really isn't important. What's fair is really important. And allowing people who earn their money through interest to pay less than half of what people who earn it through work, you know, not only does that not make any sense economically, but many would argue it doesn't make sense economically. Did I say economically twice? Morally or economically. Morally, you know, you don't want to treat poor people terribly, but economically, we need to think about what happens when you give $100 a month more to a poor person, or $100 more a month to Mitt Romney's family. What is, I'm pointing at you, I'm in that group with you, by the way. So what are we going to do with this $100? We're going to buy food. We're going to buy gas. We're going to buy clothes. We're going to buy stuff. What's Mitt Romney's family going to do? They're going to put it in a bank, in their stock. And they're going to get more interest on it. Right? Well, many will argue that this gives your economy more bang for the buck. And so when you raise the minimum wage, that's an economic stimulus. That's an economic stimulus. But your question is well taken. I think Obama at one point was trying to say over $250,000 he would bump the taxes up a little bit. I don't know if we call that rich, but that's what he was thinking about. All right, very good. So in this exercise, we were merely trying to identify the premise and the conclusion, and premise and conclusion indicators are going to be important, obviously, in that process. So let's now move on to 2.6. Leslie, do some people develop interpretations of what rich is that are unhelpful, do you think?
Well, some people try to think like having over like making 500,000 a year is considered bridge.
Mhm. It's an eye of the beholder, I guess. If you live in New York City, you're barely getting by. However, you live in Utah, you're high on the hog, you know. And the pay really does dramatically vary in different parts of the country. It's interesting. The pay here, for example, is better than anywhere around the country. Paid for professors at this college is in the top 10% in the nation. I was living out in Utah, and their salaries cap at around half of what I can earn out here. Now you're gonna pay more in rent. I'd rather live here. But it does vary dramatically, pay and what you think rich is. All right, so in this exercise, some of these passages are best viewed as attempted deductive demonstrations, and others are best viewed as offering an inductive argument. Which are which? So we're essentially looking for whether we're attempting to make a deductive argument or we're attempting to make an inductive argument. So before we begin, can somebody help me understand the difference between these two? Yes, sir, Joe.
Inductive argument is when the amount of premises you have make the conclusion more and more likely. But a deductive argument is when the premise isn't true, the conclusion must also be true.
Exactly. Exactly. Any questions with the distinction here? All right, let's take a look then. So, Cody, why don't you take number 1 for us? Read it for us and then tell us whether it's inductive or deductive.
All mammals are warm-blooded creatures, and all whales are mammals. Therefore, all whales are warm-blooded creatures. That would be deductive.
Very good. Very good. It's deductive. It's attempting to set it up such that if the premise is true, the conclusion cannot be false. Yes, sir?
I have a question. Why the little triangles by some of the questions?
They have answers in the back.
I don't want to tell you that. I don't know why. It's just a triangle thing. It's like it's the Egyptian thing, a sacred thing. I don't know. These are the important questions. Numero 2. Einstein. Travis, why don't you take that one?
The brains of rats raised in enriched environments, the variety of toys and puzzles weigh more than the brains of rats raised in more barren environments. Therefore, the brains of humans will weigh more if humans are placed in intellectually stimulating environments. I said that's inductive support.
Inductive support. Excellent. Excellent. It increases the probability that the conclusion is true. Now, let's talk about this conclusion. This is actual research that is going on, and we need to consider the implications of it. So they take these poor rats. Rats have it bad. So they raise these rats in enriched environments and these other rats in non-enriched environments. More specifically, in one room, there is no wheel, no ball, no fun. In the next room, you've got a wheel. In the next room, you have a wheel and a bridge and a block garden where there's all the toys over here. And you raise rats in each of these environments. 6 months, kill them, slice their brains. Do x-rays on the brains, and the rats in the barren environment have a smaller brain. Rats in the environment with the wheel, the neurons in their brain have strong trunks to the tree. The rats in the environment with the wheel and the bridge and the block garden, they have a strong trunk to the tree and many more limbs going out making connections to other neurons. So, the scientists conducting the experiments are themselves up in years, and in the documentary it shows them learning how to play the piano, learning how to paint, learning how to do new things. the scientist enriching their environment?
So, their brains.
Grow.
Yeah.
They grow. Your brains grow. Somebody told you a lie that brain cells die. Anybody here ever hear that lie?
Yes.
Adults say stupid things. The brain grows. And through exercise and intellectually stimulating activity, your brain grows. Conversely, if you're not using it, the brain shrinks. Think about that.
Does it actually like change in volume, or is it the density that changes?
The density changes in this enriched environment. Not only is there a stronger trunk to the tree, but there are more limbs making connection to other neurons. You know, I
Should be a
think,
luminosity rep.
well, now here's the thing. Luminosity could be a pathetic joke that is scratching on something important. And I think, for example, when you move, that makes your brain grow. Why does moving make your brain grow?
Moving in like your body or moving from home to home?
Moving to another part of the country.
Simple, you have to,
Everything's new. Yeah, where's this road go? I'm lost already. And it forces you to remember new things. That makes the brain grow. And, you know, I bet there is something to luminosity that continually work in that brain. You know, it actually uses a lot of energy. You know, using your brain, that's why we started cooking food. That enabled us to metabolize energy better, and it enabled us to support this brain. It takes a lot to get this brain going. You know? Anyway, keep that in mind as you get older. Keep exercising. Keep challenging yourself intellectually. The brain grows. It grows. It's amazing. So I have an enriched environment in my apartment. I encourage you to do so as well. All right, brains of the rats. Number 3. Michael, why don't you take number 3?
Jones won't plead guilty to a misdemeanor, and if he won't plead guilty, then he'll be tried on a felony charge. Therefore, he will be tried on a felony charge. And that is a deductive demonstration.
Jones won't plead guilty to a misdemeanor, and if he won't plead guilty, then he will be tried on a felony charge. Yeah, I think that's a deductive argument. Very good. All right, number 4. Leslie, why don't you take number 4?
We've interviewed 200 professional football players, and 60% of them favor expanding the season to 20 games. Okay.
That's a lie. Nobody wants to do that. Excuse me, Leslie.
The owners do.
Yeah, no players do.
No.
My goodness. Go ahead, Leslie.
Therefore, 60% of all professional football players favor expanding the season to 20 games. Deductive?
Leslie says it's deductive. We've interviewed 200 football players, and 60% of them favor expanding the season to 20 games. Therefore, 60% of all. So we've interviewed 200. That's not all of them.
Oh,
And so they're saying, based on this information, that's an inductive argument. Based on interviews of 200, we're estimating that that percentage applies to the whole group. Was that you, Terrence?
Oh, that was like
Listen,
yeah.
you see that?
Yeah.
So it's not deductive, it's inductive, and we're interviewing 200, and we're using that as a representative sample of the larger group. And so that would be an inductive argument. Now, by the way, in psychology, they're noted for having unacceptably small sample sizes. And in order to get a PhD, they'll let you get away with this. So you're doing a PhD dissertation in psychology, and you have this thesis that men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but you need to do a survey, and you can't do a survey of 5,000, so you interview your 5 friends, and then you infer out from there. Well, that doesn't work, but often in psychology, you're forced to use smaller sample sizes simply because you can't afford to do a larger survey. particular instance, 200 football players is a pretty large sample size, but it's still going to be an inductive argument whether that percentage is going to apply to the larger group of football players. I don't think any football player on a longer season, they can hardly make it through the season they have now healthy. Number 5, Joel, why don't you take number 5?
John is taller than Bill, and Bill is taller than Margaret, therefore John is taller than Margaret. That's deductive.
Very good. If the premise is true, it's impossible for the conclusion to be false. All right. You think you got a handle on this? Pretty clear how things work? Determining the premise and the conclusion, determining whether it's deductive or inductive. All right.
Are we not doing the diagrams? We'll be quizzed on it.
How many of you have research papers this semester? Leslie, you don't have a research paper?
No.
Nope. Travis, you have one?
Kind of.
Kind of. Kind of. Interesting. Well, eventually, you're going to have some research papers, and learning how to write them well is going to be important for you. In fact, writing in general is going to be extremely important for you. I used to think that when I couldn't get things clear on a page, I used to think that I had it clear up here and I couldn't just get it clear on the page. And I came to philosophy from mathematics. I was pretty good in calculus, and I switched over to philosophy, and so I thought I was smart, but I couldn't articulate my ideas clearly. And I distinctly remember this one midterm on a metaphysics exam. I'm talking with the professor, and he's giving me a B, and we're looking at Y. And I have this one sentence, and I go, well, you know what I meant to say here, don't you? And he goes, Tim, this is exactly what you did say. And you misspelled Descartes' name, the sentence is ungrammatical, you are not making a clear point, and it really drove it home for me that if you can't get it clear on a page for a grade on a midterm, you have no reason whatsoever to assume that it's clear up here. I mean, none whatsoever. You can't get it clear on a page. I mean, it's not even close to clear up here. So being able to clearly articulate ideas on a paper might be the same as having clear ideas in your head. And we have no right to assume that you can think things through clearly if you can't clearly write them. Yes, sir.
When I write papers, I don't know, this might help people, I don't know. But when I write papers, like I assume, it's almost like I pretend to have other people's brains in my head. So I imagine like a class or something full of people, and I'm reading what I'm saying out loud and all the questions that would come up.
Yep.
And I try to answer all those questions before they come up.
Could be very helpful. If you have an idea of the audience you're addressing. And in order to be effective writing a paper, you need to have a clear view of that audience. Yes, sir?
Are you a good drawer?
No.
Well, could you think of a perfect circle in your head?
Why do you ask?
Because just because you can think of a circle doesn't mean you can draw it and not have a clear idea of what a perfect circle is.
Is that trying to be a counter argument to the point that if you can't get it clear on a page, it's not clear in your head?
Oh no, is it?
It's pretty weak.
Oh.
Very weak. But seriously, the point I'm trying to make to you is that you think in terms of language. You think in terms of language. So if you can't use it effectively, you have no right to assume that you're thinking clearly. And that was the case with me. I was not thinking clearly. I had confidence, but I was not thinking clearly. By the way, that's an American theme.
Not thinking clearly?
Confidence and not thinking clearly. Our students coming out of high school, math, 24th, English, 22nd, confidence, number 1. It's really an issue. Ignorant jerks. That's who we're here to be raising. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. So in this chapter, we're going to try to clarify the way we write and at the same time clarify the way we think. Both at the same time. And first, we need to understand that a lot of people open their mouth and crap crawls out. It does not make any sense whatsoever. And many of them are elected officials, state's attorney, congressman from New York on global climate change, just things were rolling out of her mouth. I was embarrassed for her. I had to turn down the volume. I had to turn down the volume. Now, if I had kids in the room, I'd probably turn it off. Seriously. But I had to turn down the volume. It was so obnoxious.
What about the people who put her there?
Yeah, why did she get chosen for that?
Well, and I was thinking of, the guy who runs Meet the Press. What's his name? And he got the science guy for the left. And who else can you get? Who would you get for a knowledgeable view of the right on this? Anybody?
Good.
I'm telling you, this is the best I could find. And it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. And there are ways to address this issue from a libertarian perspective, from a perspective that would be consistent with the conservative economic view. You'd have to do it through individual initiative, through boycotts and boycotts that people choose to support, providing information that will enable people to act on individual choices. Instead, we get that pathetic excuse for a congressman, congresswoman. And it's shocking. And we need to think about this. How is that woman's view compelling? And I'm not against the gender at all. In fact, Republicans went out of their way to get a woman out there because they know so much about women. But I wonder how anyone finds that compelling, to have a woman get up there and just spout crap about climate change. I do think that we're having less patience for it. I haven't watched Fox in a while. She sounded like this guy. She sounded exactly like this guy. They say that the money we had promised 3 years ago to be new money this year is not new money. We have not paid it yet, and it is old money versus new money. For me, new money is new money. If paying in $5 or $10, it's the same money. What is this guy talking about? Does he know what he's talking about? He might not. He might not. And there are people who get up on MSNBC, on CNN, and they open the mouth and the mic is on and stuff like that crawls out. And it's allowed to go forth,
And people clap.
Oh, they'll clap. And Steve. Yeah, I think it's the same money. Yeah, great point. Yeah, this guy's on CNBC. I can tell now. But we shouldn't assume that people are being coherent, because often they are not. Now, we need to understand also that language can lead us to be ambiguous and to not be clear. Not be clear. The 49ers are upset. How can I read that or interpret it in at least two different ways?
That the team itself is upset about something, like an issue, like they're not getting paid enough, or, you know, practices are running long, or, you know, the Miami Dolphins beat them.
Correct. They were upset and they were expected to win, but they lost. That's an upset. Or they're angry. And often language leaves us unclear about what we're saying. And that's when Cody's audience patrol is well thought. That, you know, you say that and you get a question from the audience, do you mean they're angry or blah, blah, blah? And you can clarify that. And often, one word can do it. The 49ers were upset after the game. There you go. So you can clarify it often easily. In fact, we're going to get into some exercises on how you can clarify ambiguity or a lack of clarity most efficiently. So you have a sentence that's unclear, and then the challenge is, okay, Leslie, how can you clear this up in less than 2 words? And the idea is to resolve the ambiguity most efficiently. And we'll get into that.
So when you don't state like a premise, a statement can be ambiguous. Like if you had a premise attached to that.
There are many ways in which statements can be ambiguous. Many, many ways. Absolutely. And we need to watch out for all of them. Some of the sources of ambiguity and lack of clarity are going to be excessive vagueness, ambiguity, excessive generality, and undefined terms. These are all going to be things that we want to avoid. And we're going to address each of these individually. So first, vagueness. What is vagueness? Can anybody tell me what vagueness is? You are overly vague. Yes, sir?
When you lack crystal clarity on a certain topic.
Yeah. You're lacking clarity, specificity, overly general, too vague. A word or phrase is vague if the group of things to which it applies has borderline cases, and you're not sure whether these cases are in or out of the group. Great example of this. In the Constitution, we have this rule against punishment that is determined to be, quote, cruel and unusual. Cruel and unusual. So the idea is that that phrase is going to designate a set of cases that are determined to be cruel and unusual. Now, if that phrase is vague, it's going to be unclear in many cases whether that behavior is in or outside the group. Is this in or outside the group? Waterboarding. According to our former Vice President, Dick Cheney, this is not a problem.
What's waterboarding?
So waterboarding is a form of treatment that our country did to suspected terrorists over the past 12 years or so. And this is it in action. You put a cloth over the person's head, and then you pour water over the cloth in in order to create the impression that the person is drowning. So the point being made here is waterboarding cruel and unusual punishment? Now, the fact that our country said, no, it's not cruel and unusual, and now we say it is, and some people say it is, illustrates that the phrase is vague.
Subjective.
Oh, to say the least, who thought up this phrase? What does that mean? Cruel and unusual. I do that to my brother all the time. Is that illegal? You know what? Cruel and unusual. I mean, cruel and unusual. And on one sense, what is not? What kind of punishment isn't cruel and unusual? You know, that phrase is so meaningless that you could almost put anything in there.
Do you think they intentionally did that in our Constitution, or did they all know then, like, cruel and unusual is, you know, being
that's
hung up
what's,
in the middle of town?
that's what's scary.
Yeah.
Think about this. Think of what our forefathers thought was cruel and unusual, and what they didn't think was cruel and unusual, like beating slaves. That's all right. We can do that all day long. Nothing cruel and unusual about that. You know? So this phrase is like a pinnacle of vagueness. I don't know that they did it intentionally. I don't know how you come up with a phrase that, you know, put that limitation there that didn't have a little ambiguity. You might argue if they were overly specific, it would look even more ridiculous to us now. So, but here the point is that for some, this is in the group. For some, that's not in the group. Therefore, this illustrates a case where it's a borderline case. You don't know whether it's in or out. And so a phrase is vague, like cruel and unusual punishment, if there are many cases, like waterboarding, where it's difficult to determine whether somebody is in or out of the group. Can anybody give me another example of a vague concept where things might be in or out of the group? Vague. Yes, sir. Who?
Like, in cases with like police officers or TSA staff, like people who are suspicious.
Yeah, suspicious. Pull them over if they're suspicious. What does that mean? Yeah, that could be vague. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
The golden rule?
The golden rule is vague?
Yeah. I would think so.
That sounds like a Republican ploy for getting around any legislation on climate change.
Would you like me to elaborate?
Please.
So the golden rule, of course, is do unto others as you would have them do to you. People's personal preferences are very likely to change. So you're not going to come upon one outcome in every scenario that matches everybody's subjective opinion.
Yeah, in fact, I lived in Utah for a while, and I don't know what they would want me to do unto them while I was there, but I'm sure I wouldn't be sympathetic to it. Great point. Great point. That is certainly abstract and vague. Any other examples of a vague concept? Vague. Things in, things out. Cruel and unusual punishment is a great example. Vagueness occurs all the time, and we couldn't exist without it. We need to acknowledge that, so I'll meet you at the place. All right? Okay, cool. See you. Now, between he and I, we know exactly what we're talking about. Between other people, nobody would know. And that is why language is often quite what they call contextual. The meaning of a sentence is going to be dependent upon the context. Interestingly, you can get that from postcards. You ever see a postcard and somebody writing a message to somebody else? Many philosophers, there's one guy, Jacques Derrida, wrote a book called Postcard, and it was intended to make that point that language is contextual, and postcards illustrate that. Even though you can read the postcard, you have no idea what it means because you don't know who sent it and who they're sending it to in the context of the discussion. Well, vagueness will often be appropriate within certain contexts. So if you're talking to your wife and you say, let's meet at the restaurant, the nice one. Okay, cool. Well, we know exactly what we're talking about. You don't, because you're not aware of the context. Now, there will be cases where maybe you're talking in a different audience and you're not going to use enough specificity. And so one of the members of your audience will say, what do you mean by that? So you're going to have to use the appropriate amount of specificity given the context. And if you don't use that, then you could risk being vague. Ambiguity. What does it mean when a word or phrase is ambiguous? Yes, sir?
It's kind of like just like a feeling. You don't know where to stand. Like if you were to read something that's ambiguous, you wouldn't feel a position, or you wouldn't be able to specify. It's very
close.
unsettled.
In the book, they say that, and you're on the right track. You read a phrase, and there is at least two ways in which you can interpret it, and you don't know which way to go. That it's ambiguous. It's unclear. It's unclear. Some examples. How can I interpret this sentence at least two ways? Jessica is renting her house.
You don't know if she's renting it out to someone or if she's renting it for herself.
Very good, Travis. Very good. So in order for you to be clear, you're going to need to reduce the ambiguity of this sentence. Who can reduce the ambiguity of that sentence most efficiently? In as few words as possible. Jessica is renting her house. How do you distinguish between those two? Pick one and go with it.
Add out to the end.
There you go. Jessica is renting out her house. I think that would be the most efficient way to do it if you're going that route. One word. Very good. Very good. And you see, that one word takes care of it. You know that she's renting it out at that point. I like this one. My work here is finished. You know, maybe I ought to say it a different way. My work here is finished. Less is more. A little loud. Less is more. What are at least two ways in which we can interpret? Jennifer gets up to leave her job on Friday and says, my work here is finished.
I exit my job that way.
Every day?
Something along those lines.
You leave on the applause line. George Costanza. I'm out of here. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, two ways. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. Two ways we can interpret this. Was it I'm going home,
Or
I'm quitting.
Yeah.
So, often our language is going to lend itself to being ambiguous. In some cases, it might be in your best interest to clarify. Might maybe make it clear to the boss that you're going home for the weekend. I'll be back on Monday. I love that. Kids make nutritious snacks. They do, honest, they do. I think there's another one in here. They refuse to work after death. Because in heaven, you're not supposed to work. Or it could mean that some miners died and they have refused to work afterwards. So language can lead to ambiguity. I'm thinking of workers. Tennessee. Did you hear what happened in Tennessee? Union got voted down in a Volkswagen plant. Very interesting situation. Volkswagen has worker representation groups at all of their businesses. And they're going to have one at their Volkswagen plant in Tennessee. So the workers were thinking of unionizing with the UAW. They had a vote just a couple days ago. All of the Republicans in the state went nuts, and they started passing, putting out advertisements against the union. And they even put out this lie that if the plant did not unionize, they might build this new car and be around for longer. That was a lie. The Volkswagen company actually put out an article saying it was a lie. Why are these Republicans lying about the union? Because unions are one of the strongest supporters financially for the Democratic Party. And it's, the factory wanted it, you know. You ought to look into the situation. We're unionized here, and there's a reason we have unions. There's a reason. And miners, you know what happened to miners before the union?
Black woman.
Yeah, they die down there and they fill the hole. With the union, they go down and get them. It's pathetic. And you need to read about the Triangle Fire with women's clothing factories that led to the deaths of many women in these plants. And that led to legislation being passed to make unions possible. Workers actually died to make these unions possible. And now I'm listening to these workers who voted against the union there. They don't know what they're doing. But kids do make nutritious snacks. Anyway. So keep in mind, ambiguity is when a word or phrase can be interpreted in at least two different ways. In at least two different ways. Now, watch this. Watch the way politicians work. This is an exchange between John Edwards and the late Tim Russert, great host for Meet the Press. Trained as an attorney. He was chief of staff for Tip O'Neill. Tim Russert is a great host, and he would do these questions and answers a lot like a trial. Now, he asked John Edwards, why don't you support gay marriage? Now, this is important for a Democrat. This was John Edwards and Al Gore, yeah, in 2000, way back when. And so John Edwards is trying to run as a Democrat, and you're not for same-sex marriage. This is actually a problem in your home party, dude. You know, you need to work this out. So Russert asks him, why don't you support gay marriage? Now, Edwards responds, well, I guess it was the way I was raised. Now notice that the question can be interpreted in a number of different ways, and the question therefore can be interpreted as being ambiguous. But the question can be interpreted as asking for either an argument for why you don't support gay marriage, or an explanation. Now, if you're trying to become the next vice president, and you want to alienate as few people as possible, which are you going to offer? The explanation or the argument? The explanation is going to make it easier for you. I can't help it. My dad raised me Christian. I can't help it. That's the way I was raised. So I'm offering an explanation for why I don't support gay marriage, not an argument that other people can disagree with. I didn't mean to point at you, by the way, Travis. And support a gay marriage. Anyhow, the idea is that it can be interpreted in either way, and the politician, the wise politician, is going to interpret it as asking for an explanation. I can't help it. My parents raised me this way, and that's why. How about that political career? That giant sucking sound is John Edwards' career going down the sink. And I wonder if he will soon be followed by the governor from New Jersey. Anybody keeping track of what's going on in New Jersey? Oh my goodness. So they now have evidence that it appears the governor's office in New Jersey was responsible closing this bridge, the George Washington Bridge, for 4 days, creating a traffic jam in Fort Lee, this town. And it appears that if it was done as political retribution, and it appears as if the Christie governor's office was involved in the cover-up, and they created this lie that they did it as a traffic study. And so now the federal government, the state government, and everybody's investigating the Christie administration, and he's gone from the #1 Republican presidential candidate to a governor who might not make it out of office without getting impeached. And we really need to think about what's, now the evidence suggests that he closed this bridge just to penalize the people on the other side of it. I think the guy deserves to see the inside of a jail cell, to be honest with you. And the way they're covering it up, and his obnoxious attitude all along, you know. When you act like a jerk, man, on the way down, people get out of your way.
He's always been like that, though.
Yeah, he has. And I think he's going to get it, and then some, as a result. All right, so ambiguity is when it can be interpreted in more than one way, and here's a politician interpreting it in the way that best serves his interests. Gay rights. Some people see this as being ambiguous. Gay rights. Does this mean special rights for gay people? They get them and we don't? Some people have tried to interpret it that way. Many are going to point out that they're simply trying to attain the same rights that others enjoy all the time. And why don't we call that a day, and we will continue. We have a quiz. We have a quiz. So
will it be on the 2 of the 4 sources of conclusion, or are you just going to skip chapter 3 altogether?
let me take it to slide 8.
Slide 8.
So we'll cover chapter 3 to slide 8.
Are we going to be able to leave as soon as we're done with the quiz?
Yeah. We'll have further classes. All right, have a good one. I'll see you on Wednesday.
So it's just